Our next speaker is a tour de force in the mobile business and the app economy. With 14 years in analytics, mobile and technology, an MBA from Wharton, and a master's in computer networks from ISEP France, he is eminently qualified to provide expert trend analysis. He has a unique vantage point in overseeing data across the leading app store platforms globally. Speaking today on developing a successful go-to-market strategy is the CEO of APAC and EMEA, Mr. Bertrand Schmitt.
Hello. So glad to be here today and to see all of you. So I will be focused on talking about how to develop a successful go-to-market strategy. I will start with a brief introduction about us, APAC and EMEA, and after that I will spend much more time on talking about the market and what we see on the market. Maybe I will start with a question: is who already know and use APAC and EMEA in the audience? Oh, okay, great. At least half. So let me start with us, and maybe you will still learn a bit about our different services. So us, we are really positioning ourselves as providing market data for leading app stores, the same way you would get and provide market data for other space like TV or websites. Who we are today, we are 100 people. We are pretty global, mostly around San Francisco and Beijing, but with different offices in Japan, in Korea, in London. So we have a pretty good picture of what's happening, not just by the numbers we get, but also by talking with all the local players in the industry. Who is using us? Mostly everybody, I would say, is using one of our products in either our free analytics, free market data, or premium market data service. Of course, gaming is a big thing for us. That's where we have probably around 50% of our business, so that's a space we know very well. But as you all know, gaming itself is not just alone driving the industry forward, and some things like social, for instance, is definitely helping and connecting with gaming. And maybe to finish, yeah, we have more than 100,000 registered business users, people in the industry who use our site. If you hear about us, hopefully you hear about us often and from many sources. I was just finishing a live TV interview with Bloomberg. We try to be visible and to share our findings and our data around the globe through many different sources, and sometimes we partner with some other companies like IDC. So our three products, the one you are probably most familiar is the one in the center, APAC and EMEA Store Stats, where you can track for free ranks and pricing information and placement of any app in the store. So we track actually now nearly 3 million apps on the stores, and we give you an easy way to really understand what's happening. Our free analytics service, we have more than 250,000 apps using this service, so it's all about your own apps, tracking downloads and revenues. And actually a few days ago we announced our own app so that you can track your number directly from your iPhone. And we have our premium market intelligence service, where here we try to provide market estimates, very detailed by app, by publisher, by country, and to help you better understand what's happening on the store. And our numbers I will be presenting are really based on this last premium service. So let me follow up in terms of what we see in terms of trends. You will see that I will focus first very high level by stores and by country, by device, and by subcategory of games, what's happening, as well as looking at some top publishers and apps index. So of course, games are driving the App Store market, as you all know. iOS and Google Play are pretty close in terms of downloads at this stage. Actually, we recently announced that Google Play is bigger than iOS as a platform for download. However, iOS is still bigger in monetization, 2.3 times bigger for during Q2. Definitely Google Play, starting from a lower base, has gone pretty quickly in terms of revenues. It's still not too far, but we believe it will keep growing in the near future. And definitely in-app purchase, you will see is really the business model for our publishers. So as games, what does it represent as part of the App Store to really see the big picture? Most of you are in gaming, so you made the right choice. In terms of downloads, it's 40%. In terms of revenues, it's 70% of the stores. These numbers fluctuate a bit, of course, by country, by store, but it's relatively close, and it has kept growing. To give you this chart is interesting mostly for the one on the right, where you can see the growth of game revenues on Google Play. So while iOS has doubled, Google Play has really accelerated its growth, and we expect that to keep moving up. In terms of monetization through in-app purchase, this graph is pretty interesting. If you look at on the left, we are talking about games. Around 1 year ago, in-app purchase were representing a very good, already 85% of revenues in gaming. But now we are like 95% in terms of gaming. So the paid app model is definitely dying. So it will be interesting to see if this process change or keep accelerating. Outside gaming, it's a different story. A lot of things, utilities, for instance, users are not so inclined to pay through in-app purchase. So the paid model is still good, especially on iOS. Google Play paid model has always been so-so. Let's have a look country by country, what's happening. So first, as a quick summary, and you will see why in the next slide, why do we recommend for these different countries different approach to the market, depending on your local or global publishers. But Japan and US, definitely you have to be focused on both iOS and Google Play. In China, iOS is big, but Google Play is nowhere, so you have to focus on local distribution channels. South Korea, it's a market where Google Play is way bigger by revenues than iOS. So you need to focus on Google Play, and as the previous speaker was explaining, Kakao is actually a big influence on the market. Other countries, overall iOS, you will see monetized better than Google Play. What is emerging, it's China is definitely generating more and more revenues for iOS, but also for Android. You may have seen that Baidu acquired a Chinese app store for nearly $2 billion a few weeks ago. In terms of downloads, Russia, Mexico, Thailand, also India are definitely helping, accelerating the growth in downloads. They are not monetizing yet, but we believe it will at some point. And definitely Asian countries as a whole are necessary focus. So here is some numbers to back this strategy. So here we are looking at game downloads, how it breaks down across Google Play as well as iOS. As you can see, China is big in downloads on iOS. It's as big as the US at this stage. On Google Play, again, it's different Android stores that are successful over there. Google Play is not really present. And you can see that in many markets, actually, in terms of downloads, Google Play is exceeding iOS. And it's pretty clear in developing economies like Russia, Brazil, India, Mexico. And some surprise like Germany, where it's also true. So if I look at game revenues by country, US, Japan, Korea, that's 80% of Google Play revenues. So that means that outside these three countries, it's extremely difficult to make any decent money on Google Play. Even the UK is monetizing very, very little. So there is still a good job to be done by Google to really try to improve the monetization rate in many countries. And again, except South Korea in monetization, iOS is still the leader in terms of monetization. So in terms of ranking, how has it changed over time? What we see is that on iOS downloads on the left, the top 4 countries have not changed in 9 months. So that might be a bit surprising, but when you think about it, some of these countries are pretty big, like US and China. Russia has been going up, so it's definitely getting more and more interesting. If we look at on the other side on revenues, US, Japan, China keep moving up. It was number 10 18 months ago. Now it's number 3. So it's becoming a pretty interesting market if you manage to crack it open. If we look at on Google Play, there has been a bit more action in that space. So what's happening by download is that US is still the biggest market. South Korea, Russia are all there. What has been really big news in the last 8 months has been the fact that Japan first and then South Korea second managed to become bigger markets than the US for gaming on Google Play. So it's pretty surprising at first thought, but let's not forget that these countries used to have been monetizing mobile gaming for 10 years through feature phones. So that's really a big reason. Users as well as publishers knew how to learn to spend on one side and knew how to make people spend on the other side. So that has really helped this transition to become a big gaming market for smartphones. Let's have a look at device trends. So trying to compare iPhone versus iPad. So overall, 30% of all iOS downloads are coming from iPad, and iPad I include the mini, of course. One big exception definitely is Japan, where there is very, very little iPad sales in that market. And two surprising cases where Russia, Saudi Arabia, actually you get more downloads from iPad than from iPhone. Interesting point, you might notice that actually there are more downloads on iPhone in China than in the US at this stage. If we look at by revenue, another surprising fact is that actually Japan iPhone is bigger than the US in terms of gaming revenues, but combined, given how small is iPad in Japan, US still maintains the lead by a pretty big margin. But outside the US, iPad revenue is definitely lacking. So let's look at what are the game categories that are the most fast-moving. iOS, the top categories by downloads, and at the top, revenues at the bottom. You can see actually it's not the same. You can get a lot of downloads in action, arcade, puzzle, adventure categories. But in terms of revenue-wise, it's really RPG, strategy. Action is back, some puzzle simulation. So you can get a lot of downloads, but monetizing might be different depending on which type of game you're making. On Google Play, so of course Google Play categories are different. So but we see a slightly different trends. What is being downloaded is also what is being monetized most. So arcade, action, casual, brand, and puzzle, that's really the top three categories, both on downloads and as well as revenues. So let's review who were the top publishers and top apps in the last month, in June, worldwide. So as a quick summary, first Gameloft has done pretty well in terms of downloads. They managed to end up being number one in iOS game downloads last month. Chinese publisher, it's a surprise, Tiny Piece, managed to become number one worldwide on Google Play with quite a few games in terms of downloads. That's the first time we saw a Chinese publisher being the first worldwide. And of course, in terms of monetization, Supercell, Gung-Ho have been doing extremely well. There has been also some this interesting cross-promotion happening between the giant outside Japan with the giant of Japan, Supercell and Gung-Ho, working together with doing some cross-promotion activities. And also Clash of Clans, if it has always been in revenues, was usually not in our top 10 downloads, so it has been an interesting development. So which ones are the top publishers by downloads on iOS? As I said, Gameloft number one, number two EA, number three Tiny Piece in China. Interestingly, the top three have a lot of apps, but usually they churn apps pretty quickly, and every 3 months you have something at the top from these guys. King with just 3 apps, and actually the third one, Petroscu Saga, was just launched recently. Does pretty well. Disney stay pretty well. So overall, the change are really around Tiny Piece and CamMax in terms of big change, and also Metro Trains Melbourne, actually a very nice advertisement for security. Top Google Play publishers. So as discussed, Tiny Piece managed to be the top one. Followed quite closely by Gameloft, so quite a big change at the top. Rovio, still big, thanks to all of its Angry Birds franchise. King again doing well, mostly through Candy Crush Saga. EA, still big. Ashbreak, stay in the top 10. Line, which is a mix of gaming and monetization app, is also pretty big. If If we look at by revenues, it's usually a pretty different story. So Supercell still at the top on iOS with just two games, both of them pretty successful. Kim with 3 games, one monetizing extremely well. Gungro with Puzzle and Dragon monetizing extremely well. So relatively stable in terms of revenue monetization. So it's interesting to see that the downloads ranking are moving much faster than actually the revenue ranking. And definitely some companies manage to keep their top apps really at the top for a long time. If I look at Google Play, it's a bit a different story because we see much more Japanese as well as South Korean companies. Again, as you might remember, Japan and Korea are actually the 2 biggest markets there, so it should not be a surprise. Gungro doing extremely well with a big focus on Japan, some on Korea as well. Line, DNA, Gree, 3 platforms doing some communication, but really platforms for games are doing pretty well. Only 2 from Western publishers, King as well as Kabam, in this ranking. So let's look at quickly by game. What does it represent? So Gameloft is doing a pretty good job in terms of monetizing and getting a lot of downloads through apps coming from movies. So a lot of licensing on the Gameloft side. Despicable Me, it was Iron Man 3 not long ago. So they're really doing a great job there, riding on the success of movies or helping actually on the success of these movies. Candy Crush Saga, again, great downloads. Gameloft has another movie there. Tiny Piece with its crazy scientist and some other games we will see later is really doing very well. And we have some Chinese company. Kabam also is doing the licensing game. So Kabam with Fast and Furious 6 is doing pretty well. If we look at Google Play by downloads, some differences, but many similarities. Subway Surfers doing better on Google Play than iOS, definitely. Crazy Dentists going at the top very quickly. Temple Run though still there at the top. Fruit Ninja managed to stay pretty big as well as Angry Birds. If we look at revenues for top iOS games, again, Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, Puzzle and Dragon, I think that's 6 months. These guys are really dominating the revenue charts on iOS and with slight change over months, but top 3 is very, very tough to get for anybody else for quite some time now. Simpson managed to keep doing well as well, stay at the top. And Kabam again, licensing agreement related to movies. Mojang with Minecraft is probably the only game these days monetizing mostly through paid apps, through paid model, or you pay to download the app where everybody else is an in-app purchase, freemium in-app purchase. And my last slide, Google Play revenues. So here again, we Japanese and Koreans are really dominating the charts. Puzzle and Dragon doing extremely well, and on the Korean side, it's Kakao. So if you want to get to the top of the chart there, you have to work and distribute through Kakao platform. That's really something needed. And Line in Japan start to really manage to do similar things. And except Puzzle and Dragon, we see a lot of Line branded apps at the top of the charts. And that's probably it. So do we have a few minutes for questions?
We do. Thank you. Please raise your hand. We'll pass a microphone to you. A lot of really good data here.
It was dense, I know. Don't hesitate.
Well, I've got a question for you. In your market analysis and emerging trends slide, I did not see a South American country mentioned. Can you comment on the growth of these games in the South American markets on both iOS and Android?
That's a very interesting question. I think definitely Latin America is a different market. It's still heavy in terms of feature phone usage, and we don't track feature phone. We are really focused on smartphones. And so we are not just focused on smartphones, but we are focused on the big worldwide platforms like iOS and Google Play. And we see definitely some downloads on Google Play, but not yet enough to be inside the top 10. Even if Brazil is definitely going up, but the issue is with the monetization. It's a lot of prepaid, not a lot of options to top up some cards, your accounts with Google Play. Also, you might have a 3G phone, but without 3G subscription, limiting the use of the game. So that's probably what's happening. We expect the market to grow in smartphone to get much bigger. I am more optimistic on Google Play platforms than Apple platform because it's very price sensitive. And until and unless Apple has some better price phones in this region, it will be difficult for them.
But do you see smartphone penetration gaining?
Oh yeah, it's gaining up. Yeah, no question. Android specifically.
Thank you.
It will be low price handsets.
Anybody else? You're the CEO of App Annie right here. You can ask him anything.
Go wide.
Hi, thanks for the great presentation. Sorry. I was wondering what is happening in Russia with regards iPad. Are people using it differently? Does it have some kind of a different role in people's life, or what's up with that?
So I think some developing economies have a pretty weird usage patterns. If you take China, for instance, there is a lot of gift giving. You get your iPad as a gift. I think in Russia it's probably a bit less gift giving, but a bit more that you might have bought an iPhone because you want to have this very expensive quasi-luxury stuff on your table. You might not even have a 3G connection and have done anything but more than exchanging SMS with it. So like a luxury item, but you don't even know how to use it. But people will end up buying iPads in Russia, and in some other European economies it was more like another laptop actually. So really using it seriously, and not just to display that on your table, but to really make good use of it. So that's something that will at least partially explain. I would say in Russia, I would like just to highlight one point that there is issues right now with, apparently all carriers have stopped to sell the iPhone there, or at least to subsidize the iPhone. And people might not know, but an iPhone without subsidies, it starts at $600. This is before any additional tax you might add. So Brazil used to be the cheapest iPhone was like $900. So imagine you make 3 times less money than in the US, but you have to spend $900.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue in terms of, okay, you might have a few people who can afford this, but if you go mass market, it's very different.
Good point.
So it will be interesting to see how, will iPhone simply end up dying down in Russia, for instance? We have seen that in India, Apple, for instance, has launched some special plans to try to make it cheaper, so they will try to subsidize themselves the iPhone. So you buy you will have to pay every month to Apple to pay back your iPhone.
Crazy.
That's the way, but at the end of the day, you still pay $800 for your iPhone.
One more, perhaps? Well, then let's give Bertrand a really big round of applause.
Okay.
Thank you.